Well, let's go to the next track called "Oh George," and this is apparently his tribute to George Harrison. Excuse me. The track highlights Grohl's admiration for the Beatles, and the melodic guitar work pays homage to Harrison's style. Okay, let me ask you this question: could you consider Dave Grohl to be a modern day George Harrison, or at least the '90s version of George Harrison?
Uh, I think it's a fair comparison. I mean, he obviously didn't have the breadth that the Beatles had material wise, but I think you could make an argument alone just on his influence.
I mean, there are 4 points that I wrote down, right? And this is why I think that he is the '90s version of George Harrison. Okay,
Right.
he's an important part of one of the most influential bands in history. Oh, he was the drummer for
Yes,
Nirvana. Check.
absolutely.
He was overshadowed by a generational songwriter. I
So
mean, so
that
was
puts Kurt Cobain in the John Lennon position, essentially, in that
yeah,
analogy.
Lennon McCartney, right?
I agree that Kurt Cobain basically was the John Lennon of the 90s,
Yeah.
for the
Uh,
sake of argument, yeah.
he showed his own talent when the influential band ended,
Hmm.
and he could be considered to have the best post career of the people in that band.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers,
Yeah,
and that's solely based on longevity, because keep in mind, Nirvana was only a band for like 5 years.
yeah,
The Foo Fighters have put out like more than half
multiple.
a dozen albums. They've toured the world numerous times. So I mean, he's got a bigger sample size for that. But yeah, I would argue, even though it's kind of not exactly congruent, I think you could definitely make that case. It's
Yeah,
definitely a something I didn't consider before.
I mean, it's hard being in that kind of shadow, and the difference, I guess, being was that George Harrison wanted out of that shadow, whereas Dave Grohl would have been happy to be Nirvana's drummer for the last 20 years if Kurt was still with us. Last
Yeah,
30 years.
even though he was unsure about his place, ultimately, like he loves playing drums. He loved being in Nirvana. I mean, it was something that he loved. It's just the how volatile Kurt's situation was and how he was as a person that made it kind of stressful.
Yeah. So it's a good little theory, but I mean I think it's one that sticks out. His admiration for Harrison, he became Harrison. You know,
Yeah.
so